Looks like we're live, Rami.
You see it on YouTube?
I just got a message that we're live on YouTube, and we're definitely live on X.
Perfect. Okay, let me.
Yeah, we're fine.
Okay. Yeah, just going to open. Let me see if we're getting the comments here. We are getting comments. Great. Let me see. Yeah, let's maybe give it 2 more minutes just to see how many people are tuned in. All right, folks. We're just going to casually start. This is going to be a special episode of Week in Review. As you're all aware, there's been some very fast developments happening in Syria in the past week. So we're going to just focus on the events that have unfolded in Syria and that they're currently happening at the moment. We're going to try to make sense of what happened, see how things are going to develop. Although there's a lot of things that have happened around the world, such as the elections in Romania that have been annulled, or a martial law / breach of democracy in South Korea. I feel with the implications of recent events in Syria, it seems like we really have to put our entire focus on these recent events. Please keep sharing questions, comments in the comment section. We're going to hopefully address all of them, if not a good majority of them. Just to maybe put some context into what happened, on the 29th of November, the HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, led by Jolani, went on the offensive, breaking the Astana summit agreement of de-escalation. And on the 29th, the Battle of Aleppo started, marking significant advances by HTS. By the 2nd of December, the city of Aleppo fell in the hands of Al-Nusra Front, which is affiliated with Al-Qaeda, which was rebranded as HTS. And then right after the Aleppo battle started on the 30th of November, there was an offensive towards Hama that was started. And that really marked what we've noticed as observers and analysts is that there was a rapid advance from HTS, and they were looking to stop at Aleppo, and we're definitely headed towards Damascus. So that was on the 30th of November. They started moving towards Hama. On the 5th of December, Hama fell. And right after Hama fell on the 5th of December, the offensive towards Homs started. And Homs, as we know, is a city very close to Lebanon. It's where Radwan forces and most Hezbollah soldiers are kind of installed, and manages the flow of resources and weapons going from Iran straight into Hezbollah. Now, before we get into...
Rami, can I just stop you there and suggest, as you're doing this, if you pull up image 11 or 10, perhaps image 10, so people can see the progression of these military forces towards Damascus from Idlib, where they began.
Yeah, let me look for image 10. Yeah, we're using a new software here. I remember. Oh, image 10. Image 10 is right here. So image 10. So right. So the offensive, which started in Idlib, then went straight to Aleppo, where Aleppo fell, I think, on the 2nd of December, and then started going south from Idlib towards Hama and Homs. We know that Idlib is at the border of Turkey, which is also where there's a buffer zone that was agreed upon at the Astana summit, or after the Astana summit, where Turkey requested a buffer zone, supposedly to defend themselves. But as we see the events unfolding at the moment, we know this is where HTS received much funding, resources, and weapons to execute its attack. In 2017, there was an agreement that was signed upon Turkey, Iran, Russia to work towards a de-escalation and a peaceful settlement to the war that was happening in Syria. And the 2017 Astana Agreement basically called for creating 4 Syrian de-escalation zones, one of the main ones being the one in Idlib, and basically called for the ease of access of medical aid and humanitarian aid to all territories of Syria, regardless if they were under the hands of the terrorists or the government at the time. And it worked towards also building reconciliation between the different factions in Syria. And between 2017 and today, there was relative status quo, pockets of Islamist cells within towns that were governed by Bashar al-Assad. And from 2017 until today, it seemed like the terrorists were able to rearm themselves and plan the offensive that occurred. As much as it seems like the terrorists were going from Idlib to Aleppo, there were pockets of these terrorists already in Aleppo, in Hama, in Homs, that were activated right after the ceasefire in Lebanon was agreed. And we also know that from 2017 until today, or even throughout the entirety of the Syrian war, the Israelis were bombing Iranian forces and Syrian military structure, targeting their anti-air defenses, weapon depots, warehouses, etc. So we know that there was a lot of aid coming in from Israel to facilitate the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian Arab Republic. That's basically, Dimitri, I think, unless I'm forgetting anything major.
But could you just leave the, I'm sorry, could you leave the image up on the screen? Because I did want to just add a couple of comments. Thank you, Rami.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead. You were saying?
So this is basically, I think, putting in context what happened in the past week. And then, of course, yesterday, it appears that Bashar al-Assad fled. I think there were confirmed reports from TASS that Bashar al-Assad is currently in Moscow under a humanitarian visa or agreement. And it seems like Jolani is currently in Damascus. The presidential palace has been claimed by HTS, and it seems like, from what I've been reading, there's a 3 weeks period where there's going to be a transition of power between the prime minister of Syria and the HTS group that is going to be assuming power. So there's a lot of unknowns coming up. It's hard to speculate on what's going to happen, but this is kind of the context that brought us to where we are today.
Thank you, Rami. And by the way, 3 weeks, I'm going to say a few things about this map in a moment, but 3 weeks is an incredibly brief, almost symbolic period of time. You have an insurgent force made up of terrorists, we'll get back into that in a moment, who have never governed any country, not even a region, let alone a country. And in 3 weeks period, they're supposed to transition into a competent and capable government for a country as troubled, as devastated as Syria is. That is a pipe dream. But, I guess some pipe dreams too come true. In any event, I want to just say a few other things about this map. If you look, as Rami mentioned, they started out in Idlib in the upper left-hand corner, kind of the pale green area bordering on Turkey. And then they went kind of in a north easterly direction towards Aleppo. Now, if you look to the east of Aleppo, that yellow zone, that is the zone that is controlled by the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF. In the eastern part of that zone near the Iraqi border, there are oil fields that have basically been stolen by the Americans. There are American troops there. There is important agricultural land in this yellow zone. During the last number of years, while the Americans have been there, they've not only been stealing the oil, they've been stealing the critical agricultural resources of Syria, which has impoverished the country to an even greater degree over the last several years, not to mention a punishing, inhumane sanctions regime imposed on Syria by US and other Western states. But the point here is the forces of HTS, after taking Aleppo almost without any resistance, instead of moving, remember, these are Turkish-backed forces. This is basically Turkey's proxy army. And rather than go towards the yellow zone, that which is controlled by the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, they took a turn to the south. Turkey is always talking about the threat of Kurdish separatism. Well, clearly their priority was not to confront the Kurdish forces in this area. Their priority was to unseat the government of Bashar al-Assad, and so they moved south, as Rami mentioned, through Hama and then Homs and now Damascus. And if you'll see in the lower, sort of the middle on the left-hand side of this map, which is the Mediterranean coastline of Syria and then Lebanon, there's Lebanon tucked there in the corner. Now that they have effectively created a barrier between Iraq to the east and Lebanon, it is no longer, practically speaking, possible for Hezbollah, the Islamic resistance in Lebanon, to be resupplied by land. That was the route through which the weapons were traveling from Iran and into Iraq and then into Lebanon. So Lebanon now is effectively under siege. Hezbollah, the Islamic resistance, is under siege. And this is not due to some military prowess on the part of Israel. Israel failed to defeat Lebanon or Hezbollah in its ground incursion. In fact, after 6 or 7 weeks, it sustained heavy casualties and had to withdraw. What has basically saved Israel's ass militarily is Turkey by sending its proxy army southward and cutting off the flow of weapons into Lebanon. So with that, I think you can take down the map for the moment. We can come back to this later, Rami, but I just want to say something about HTS. Just to drive home the point that we're dealing here with a terrorist organization. It's not just us who's saying this. It's not just members of the Axis of Resistance who are saying this. The US government itself has for years designated HTS as a foreign terrorist entity. So Rami, could you please pull up image 1? I'm sorry, image 3. Now, this is the counterterrorism guide of the Director of National Intelligence of the United States government. And you'll see that they specifically say that HTS is a foreign terrorist organization. And they note in the second paragraph of overview that this was an organization, HTS, that was initially called the Al-Nusra Front at the time that the Syrian war began. And the Al-Nusra Front was the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And then it broke off. And in about 2017, the Al-Nusra Front rebranded. And that's when it became HTS. But even then, even after it rebranded and it claimed to have severed its connections to Al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda and ISIS, it said very clearly, the US government continued to take the position, and up to this current time, that HTS is a foreign terrorist organization. If you scroll down, Rami, to the bottom of that image, you'll see
technical issues. Yeah, Dimitri, we'll have to move on a bit, trying to figure that out.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you, at the bottom of that image, maybe Rami can pull it up, but if you can't, you'll see the mugshot of Jolani.
Can we see it on screen?
There he is in the bottom left-hand corner, Al-Jolani, and this is the man who is now going to be the leader of Syria. So this person, the head of a U.S. designated terrorist organization, is about to replace Bashar al-Assad. We'll come back to that in a moment. Now, about this rebranding, I just want to point something out to compare any notion, because you're going to see this in the Western mainstream media a lot. If you haven't been paying attention and you start paying attention, you're going to see this a lot. They're going to talk a lot about this rebranding, and try to lend some credibility to the idea that even though the U.S. government still designates this as a terrorist organization, which the Western media are trying desperately not to report, even though you can easily confirm this yourself. They're still trying to convey the impression that because it rebranded, it's a different organization now, and hey, maybe now they've become the good guys. Well, I would just compare this to the evolution of Hamas. Hamas, when it was first formed, I believe back in the 1980s, it had a charter which openly called, pretty much openly called for the destruction of Israel, and contained some commentary which certainly one could characterize as anti-Semitic. And then in around the same time as the Al-Nusra Front rebranded as HTS, the Hamas changed its charter. Now, this was a much more significant thing than just changing your name. Changing your name is pure cosmetics. Hamas actually fundamentally modified, reformed the founding charter of the organization, and it no longer removed any commentary which one could plausibly argue was anti-Semitic, and it essentially accepted the notion of a two-state solution, so that there would be some form of Israel surviving the creation of a Palestinian state. And in the West, that's systematically ignored. It's systematically ignored that they changed the founding constitution of the organization in very important ways back in 2018. When you see Zionists talking about Hamas, they only talk about the original founding charter. They ignore the reformed one. But in the case of Al-Nusra, just because it's changed its name, we're supposed to believe that it's no longer a terrorist organization, even though the U.S. government continues to call it a terrorist organization. Now, I just want to elaborate on a couple of things that Rami said about how we got here. Could you pull up image 1? Rami,
Yeah.
This would be the statement of the Russian Foreign Ministry. So this was put out, a statement. Well, this is actually Xinhua, the Chinese news agency, reporting on a statement by the Russian Foreign Ministry. Bashar al-Assad has left Syria, so that was issued today, and resigned as the country's president while calling for a peaceful transfer of power. And then the second paragraph, after negotiations with some of the participants in the armed conflict with the Arab Syrian Republic, they don't say who were the participants, Bashar al-Assad decided to resign as president, leave the country while instructing for a peaceful transfer of power. And then interestingly, the last sentence is, the ministry added that Russia did not participate in any talks related to a transfer of power. Personally, I find that very difficult to believe. I can't believe that there wasn't at least indirect participation by Russia. I mean, Russia actually put its forces at risk to prevent the takeover of Syria by these terrorists way back in, I think, 2015. Lives were lost. They have important military bases there, which we'll come back to. Assad has been their ally, their close ally in this region for many years. So the idea that they weren't at least consulted, didn't at least indirectly participate in these talks, seems very, very dubious to me. But I can understand why Russia would want to lead us to believe they weren't participating, because one could then argue that this looks like some kind of a defeat for Russia. The fact that its ally has had to leave the country and they assented to it. So I think they want to distance themselves from this. Now, I can't say for sure they were involved in the talks. I just think probably in some way, directly or indirectly, they were involved. In any case, another question that's left open here. Okay, so there were discussions with some participants. What did Assad get in exchange? What did he demand in exchange for his agreement to allow for a peaceful transfer of power and to leave the country? We don't know, but there seems to have been some kind of a deal. Now, could you pull up image 2? Rami?
Yeah, Dimitri, I also want to say that there could also be Russia wanting to give an illusion that that this is being managed entirely by the Syrian people, because now it has to negotiate with it has to have diplomatic relations with the new Syrian government. And also there was a statement that came out that the Syrian HTS terrorists will be giving free passage to the Syrian base in Tartus. So there seems to be, everything is pointing to me to the fact that there is an agreement, because there's really no reason why HTS would entertain the idea of a Russian base on the Mediterranean Sea. So you said
Right.
picture number 8. Let me find this over here. Number two. Okay. Yes. Number 2. Yes. Okay.
So this was an article published by TASS, I think it was just 2 hours or so ago before we began this live stream, in which TASS revealed, this is the state news agency, that Assad has arrived in Moscow and has been granted asylum. Undoubtedly, his close family members have also been included in the grant of asylum by the Russian Federation. So clearly, the Russian Federation, I think it's fair to say, is trying to, whatever the deal was that was struck, it's trying to ensure that the deal goes forward. It's cooperating with that deal by giving Assad and his family members a safe haven. So where we currently stand, as I indicated, is that some kind of negotiation has gone on here. This could be weeks in the making, because Assad was in Moscow in late October. He went there with members of his closest advisors, members of his government, and there are pictures available of them sitting across the table with Russian President Vladimir Putin. They were obviously having important discussions about what was going on here. And the thing that really sort of stands out for me is that there was never really any point, as far as I can tell, I could be wrong about this, where the Syrian army under Assad's command put up fierce resistance. It seems to have put up at best token resistance right from the time that this terrorist organization attacked Aleppo in the first phase of this assault. And I would have thought that if Assad had not already come to an agreement to allow for a peaceful transition to power at around the time this assault began, that at some point along the way, these rebels would have met fierce resistance, if not in Aleppo, then in Homs or in Hama or in the outskirts of Damascus. But it appears that at no point did they encounter fierce resistance. So in any case, we can't say for sure whether there was a backroom deal. If there was one, we can't say when it was entered into. We don't know what the terms of it were. And I think likely in the months and weeks ahead, we are going to learn more about this. But at this time, it's just too unclear.
Dimitri, I also want to say that there was a short statement that came out of the Astana summit that occurred, I believe I was on either the December 6th or 7th, on the sidelines of a conference that was happening in Doha. And the statement coming out of this Congress, Lavrov ended up saying that Russia, Iran, and Turkey expressed support for dialogue between the government and legitimate opposition in Syria. So I was quite shocked to hear the change of tone, where the opposition was now called legitimate opposition. This is a statement that was kind of signed upon by Russia, both Russia and Iran, which seemed to pave the way that now the opposition is a lot more legitimized, and they are representing a segment of the Syrian population, which I felt was a bit of a change of position, as we've seen in the past, compared to how the Russians and Iranians were labeling the HTS and all these different groups that were uprising in Syria, many of them being foreign-backed or foreign themselves.
Now, can I just say, Rami, I think there's ambiguity in the statement you're quoting, because when they use the phrase legitimate opposition groups, I don't This is exactly what they said. We urge dialogue between the government and the legitimate opposition. I think they were leaving open the question of what the legitimate opposition was. I think that, in fact, the fact that we're using the word legitimate implies that some of the opposition to Assad's regime is illegitimate. I don't think that the Russian government, because they've consistently taken the position up until the current day that HTS is a terrorist organization. So I think there's probably a disagreement, which they tried to paper over, between Turkey on the one side and Russia and Iran on the other, as to whether HTS is legitimate opposition. So I just wouldn't take that statement as a concession on the part of Russia and Iran that HTS is legitimate. Certainly, that doesn't comport with the statements that Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has been making right up until the current time. But in any event, did you want to add something else about Astana?
Well, about Astana, not so much. Yeah, I think we could carry on then with.
Okay, could you then pull up? I want to say a couple of more words about HTS. Image 4.
Image 4.
And this is just to help, provide some color about HTS's ideological orientation. When you say that labeling an organization as a terrorist organization is really a comment on its tactics. It doesn't really. It's not really a statement about its goals. You can have legitimate goals and be a terrorist organization. You're a terrorist organization if you use illegitimate tactics, and specifically, you target civilians or civilian infrastructure with violence or threats of violence. Those are the tactics that make one a terrorist entity. But what your goals are remains an open question. And in the case of HTS, I want to talk about their political goals. This statement, as the former Mossad director Ephraim Halevi makes clear, reveals that during the years where HTS was the Al-Nusra Front, so it hadn't even gone through its cosmetic rebranding yet, Israel was giving medical assistance to wounded fighters of the Al-Nusra Front. And, I think we can safely say that the Israeli government and military don't have any humanitarian impulses when it comes to Arabs and Muslims. If you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you. So clearly, if the Israelis were giving medical treatment to wounded fighters of the Al-Nusra Front, it's because they wanted the Al-Nusra Front to succeed. So they're clearly aligned. Now, can you also pull up, in terms of their objectives, they have some common ground. And I think we can safely say that the Al-Nusra Front and now HTS is no friend whatsoever of the Palestinian people. Now, could you pull up image number 5, Rami? And this is an article by Ben Norton published 2 days ago. Ben notes that the Israeli media is crowing about how HTS, the terrorist organization that grew out of Al Qaeda and ISIS, are telling people that they love Israel and that the U.S. gave them billions in weapons and support. So again, I think that can tell you quite a bit about what the ideological orientation of this organization is. And of course, it has done absolutely nothing, HTS or its predecessor, the Al-Nusra Front, or Al Qaeda, to ever come to the assistance of the Palestinian people. They love attacking fellow Arabs and fellow Muslims. This is where their bloodlust and their killing has been directed. But when it comes to defending an Arab population and predominantly Muslim population living in historic Palestine, they have no interest in that whatsoever. So I think that can tell you quite a bit about the political objectives of this terrorist entity. So with that, I want to talk about what is undoubtedly... Sorry, go ahead, Rami.
Just before, there was also that Times of Israel article that was an interview with a Free Syrian Army called that was basically thanking Israel for bombing Iranian positions in Syria and mentioning how they will have no political grievances against Israel, and that they're open to recognizing Israel and having economic ties. So those links between Israel and whether it is HTS or other factions within the Free Syrian Army are just way too obvious, right? There's really no way to ever think that these factions would ever have any form of opposition to Israel. I'm sure we're going to be talking about this later on, but while HTS is now in Damascus, Israel has expanded its occupation of the Golan Heights, increasing a buffer zone that is nearly 14 kilometers within, beyond the demarcation line in the Golan Heights. And I haven't read any reports of the new Syrian government, or whatever you want to call it, being able to confront this occupation of Syrian land. So
Right.
yeah.
So the other thing I should point out, Rami, you reminded me, is that we had Syrian commentator Kevork Almasian on Reason to Resist, I think it was about a week ago, before we knew that the regime was going to fall in Syria and that HTS would assume power. And although Kevork he's been very clear, and you can watch his excellent analysis on a YouTube program called Syriana Analysis. Although he's very clear that he does not support Bashar al-Assad, he was horrified by the prospect, coming from Aleppo as he does and having family members in Aleppo right now. He was horrified at the prospect that HTS would take power in Syria, and listed a number of atrocities that they have committed over the years. He has seen video evidence of this, spoken to eyewitnesses in Syria about the atrocities, really horrible things, which I don't even want to repeat. And he mentioned that a lot of these fighters at HTS aren't even from West Asia. They come, for example, a good number of them are Uyghurs from Xinjiang in China, Muslim Uyghurs, and Turkic peoples from Central Asia, Uzbekistan, who've come to wage war with the support, arming, funding, and training of Turkey and the United States on the Syrian Arab people. Now, I want to talk at this stage, Rami, about Bashar al-Assad. And before I get into that in any detail, I'd like to make some general observations about how we in the West deal in the so-called mainstream media with the official enemies. And it's been my experience that when the corporate media and the political elites in the West want to condition the population to support an initiative to oust somebody from power who is not sufficiently obedient to Washington, they typically will employ three tactics, the Western media, in order to demonize this person and build support for some regime change operation. The first thing they do is what I call amplify, repeat, and exaggerate. So what they will do is they will take legitimate criticisms of human rights abuses, for example, repressive and authoritarian behavior, and that are based upon evidence and facts, and will amplify them, repeat them endlessly, and to a degree also exaggerate them. So that's the first tactic they employ. The second tactic they employ is what I call make shit up. They will just fabricate human rights abuses that the target of the regime change operation actually didn't engage in, or there's insufficient evidence to say that they did actually engage in that atrocity. And the third tactic they will employ is they will ignore any positive aspects of the record of the leader whom they want to oust from power. And in the real world, most leaders are not pure evil. Even the most, you could probably identify some good things that Benjamin Netanyahu has done for his country. Even I will admit, as much as I loathe the man and think he should spend the rest of his life rotting in The Hague, and that he's one of the most evil actors on the world stage today, he's probably done a few things in his long political career which actually were to the benefit of the state of Israel. So, it's hard to find somebody who is pure evil. Usually the reality of a leader, even the ones that we think are unfit to hold power, is a little bit more complex than that. So what does this all, how does this all relate to Bashar al-Assad? Well, my personal view, like Kavur Amassian, I've never been a fan of Assad. I've never said a positive word about the man. I've never said or suggested or implied or felt that he is fit to be the leader of Syria or any other country. But I also will be the first to say that the corporate media have employed all three of these tactics against Bashar al-Assad. Yes, he has been repressive and authoritarian, in my opinion. He was a dictator. His father and he ruled Syria for 50 years. Very hard for a father and then a son to rule a country for half a century without being dictatorial and depriving people of their democratic rights. There is serious evidence that his government and the forces within his government employed torture, including against a Canadian, Maher Arar. And so a lot of the criticism that we hear about him has been fully justified, in my opinion. Others may disagree, but that's my judgment based on what I know. However, it's also been true that a lot of the stuff that's been said about him is just nonsense, or it's not supported by credible evidence. And the one example of this that really stands out for me is the alleged gas attack by Assad's government or forces on the city of Douma in Syria, which almost precipitated a full-blown war involving the United States back in, I think, around 2018. And I commend to you, if you believe that Assad's government or forces were behind that attack, consult the analysis, the excellent journalism of Aaron Mate, who talks about how there was a cover-up. That internationally appointed experts looked at the evidence that the Syrian government was behind that gas attack and raised serious questions about whether in fact it was. And then their findings were suppressed. And anybody who questioned them, and anybody who supported them, I should say, was vilified as a supporter of Assad and as a conspiracy theorist. But in fact, the evidence supporting the claim about the Douma gas attack is not credible, not persuasive at all. And then finally, the third tactic they employed against Assad, which they always employ against the targets of the regime change operation, was ignore the positive. Yes, I would say there are some positive aspects to the record of Assad, notwithstanding his quite notable and serious flaws. One of them is that he did support the Palestinian people to a significant degree, much more so than any of the Arab leaders who are aligned with the West, like the King of Jordan, or the brutal dictator of Egypt, or the Saudi autocrat, or the autocrats in Kuwait, or the United Arab Emirates, who normalized with Israel while Israel was subjecting Palestinians to a state of apartheid. And that is a positive aspect of his record. Another positive aspect of his record is that, at least relative to regimes like that of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, women in Syria were treated by the government relatively liberally. They had more freedom, before this war broke out, which was devastating for the entire population. They, I think we can say with considerable confidence, had a lot more freedom and were treated a lot more as equals than they were in many of the countries that we support in West Asia. And the final thing that I think you can say about Assad's record, which is arguably positive, is that Syria under Assad was a pluralistic society where, until this terrible war broke out, which was very much ignited and fueled by Western governments in Israel, where Christians and Arabs and Sunni and Shia and Kurds were able to coexist for quite some time, more or less peacefully, and people were free to practice their religion or not as they chose. The government of Assad did not, as far as I can tell, try to impose upon any particular religious group the religious system or beliefs of any other group, which again is more than one can say for some of the regimes that our governments, the Western governments, support in the West. Now, having said all of that, I personally would be the first to cheer the departure of Bashar al-Assad and his removal from power if I was confident that what he was going to be replaced with was democratic. and was truly interested in the well-being of the Syrian people and the sovereignty of the Syrian people, and was going to demand, to the best of its ability, that all governments in the region and beyond comport with and respect the principles of human rights and international law. I would be the first to cheer him being removed from power and replaced by somebody of that nature. But why would you cheer the removal of somebody from power, even if you have a very negative opinion of that leader, if what's going to replace them is even worse for the people who have been living under the tyranny of the deposed leader? That just doesn't make any sense to me, and it seems to me that is very much where we're heading now. And it's sort of to drive home my point, Rami. Maybe I'll just leave it to you to comment right now, but I do want to drive home my point with some videos.
Look, in 2013, Al-Nusra Front committed a massacre in Latakia, massacring Alawites into 2 mass graves. There was around 200 to 250 civilians killed because they were Alawites. In Idlib, from 2017 till today, the schools there are completely segregated. There's now it's not just HTS, it's now we're walking towards an era of Turkey taking over all of Syria. In Idlib, during the Turkish occupation, the Turkish occupation is still going on, they were using, in many cases, the Turkish lira as a currency. So now Turkey is transferring itself from a country to a neo-Ottoman type of, someone could argue that it's been the case for the last 2 decades or so, but has been transferring itself into an actual neo-Ottoman empire. And now it will be continuing its quest to, you spoke about minorities. I'm very careful about what's going to be happening to the Kurds living in Syria. So we could only pray for the best of what could happen under an Al-Qaeda-run government in Syria. And all we know is that now there's, we know that the only current border between Palestine and Lebanon, there's no goods that could enter Lebanon from these, no weapons could really enter Lebanon anymore, because all of that border with Syria is now in the hands of people that haven't shown themselves to be allies of the Palestinian cause, nor of any form of resistance.
Yeah. So I'd like to just sort of drive home the point that I'm trying to make here by revisiting a little history. So could you pull up video 7 and just play that brief clip for our audience, Rami? Now, what you've watched there, friends, is a video many years ago shot at the time of the ouster from power of Muammar Gaddafi from Libya. And there you saw rebels dismantling and cheering as it was dismantled a statue that had been erected in honor of Muammar Gaddafi. And of course, at the time that Muammar Gaddafi was removed from power, Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State, was cheering and crowing about the fact that the Obama administration not only removed him from power, but engineered his murder, his brutal murder. And then we know what happened to Libya. Libya descended into a chaos from which it has never recovered. And in fact, it got so bad, there was a period of time, this may still be going on, where there were slave markets on coastal, I think it was Tripoli in Libya. And we know, I can tell you, having spent a lot of time in the south of Greece, where I have a home, there are people. Greece is where my home is directly north. It's due north on the other side of the Mediterranean from Libya, and there are refugees, desperate refugees, coming across from Libya in rickety boats, drowning, being prevented from coming to the shores of Europe, which contributed to the destruction of Libya. They're preventing these desperate refugees from coming to Europe after having destroyed their country. So that's how that whole experience of elation at the overthrow of Gaddafi played out for the Libyan people. Now, let's go back further in time. And Rami, could you please share?
Everyone's focus fell on the statue of Saddam.
Will you bring this statue down?
The Americans brought in a tank recovery vehicle. One over-exuberant Marine couldn't resist a bit of flag-waving patriotism first. The stars and stripes were taken down and replaced by the Iraqi flag. Then the moment of history. Saddam's regime could finally be said to be at an end.
There it goes! There it goes!
So there you see again the broadly disseminated images at the time of the overthrow of Saddam Hussein of people celebrating the streets. I, for one, don't question that the elation of those people was genuine. I'm sure that there were many Iraqis who were overjoyed when their family members and their friends who had been, consigned to the dungeons of Saddam Hussein and tortured were liberated and rejoined them. I'm sure that there was many moments of genuine celebration on the part of people whose family members had been subjected to gas attacks. Saddam Hussein actually did gas his own people. And by the way, he also gassed the Iranians during the Iraq-Iran war with the total complicity of the United States and other Western governments. So I did not shed a tear when Saddam Hussein was overthrown, but by what was he replaced? He was replaced with chaos, because the governments who overthrew him had no interest in securing democracy and peace and prosperity for the people of Iraq. The British and the Americans and the other Western governments and local proxies who overthrew Saddam Hussein were only interested in enriching themselves, no matter the cost to the Iraqi people. And the cost to the Iraqi people was mind-boggling. By some estimates, credible estimates, over 1 million Iraqis died. And to this very day, the country remains in a state of servitude and impoverishment under an American occupation that just won't end. And so finally, let's come to the present. Rami, and could you please play video?
Breaking news coming into us, and Syria opposition activists and a rebel commander are reported to have reached the suburbs of the Syrian capital, Damascus. And these pictures coming into us of a toppling of a statue of President Bashar al-Assad's father in the suburbs of Damascus. So we believe around 10 kilometers or so from the city centre, a significant moment in this war, which has been raging on for more than a decade. Of course, reminiscent, this imagery of that moment, the statue of Saddam Hussein was once toppled in Iraq, of course.
Oh, yes, it is indeed reminiscent of that moment when Saddam Hussein's statue was overthrown. Because as in the case of the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad has absolutely nothing to do with the well-being, prosperity, or democracy of Syria, and everything to do with the narrow, nefarious agenda of the Western hegemonists who engineered his overthrow. And that, folks, is a movie which they just won't stop playing for us. And at what point are we going to stop believing this C-grade, crappy, pathetically dramatic Hollywood movie? Because that's what it is. You know, they constantly roll out images of people who are probably genuinely elated to see the tyrant overthrown, but who are about to experience a horror that is even worse than they knew under the person that whose demise they are celebrating. And I fear that that's what awaits our brothers and sisters in Syria. And I would very, very much like to be wrong about this. And so I think the last word I want to say about this, it's something yesterday I was invited on to RT International to talk about what was happening in Syria, and particularly in Damascus. I've posted that interview on my Rumble channel. I can't post RT interviews on YouTube because YouTube won't allow it. And if you want to watch it, you can watch it there. It's an 8-minute segment. And basically I explain my view. Again, I hope to God that I'm wrong about this, that what is really going on here is that the Americans and the Israelis and the Turks are going to carve Syria up, turn it into a failed state, and that what the Syrian people are about to endure will be even worse than the hell that they've endured over the last 14 years. And perhaps not worse, but not significantly better either. At the end of the day, be assured that it is not the well-being of the Syrian people which these terrorists and their backers are prioritizing.
Dimitri,
Is that Rami? You have anything to add?
I mean, I just want to say that in the Levantine, as Palestinians, we often feel a great sense of brotherhood as Jordanians, Syrians, Lebanese. We all consider ourselves to a certain extent greater Syrians, right? As people from, in some way, the same country that was divided by people that are foreign to us by the Sykes-Picot Agreement. So when we talk about this being awful for Syrians, it's awful for greater Syrians. It's awful for all Syrians. That includes us Palestinians. Last stream, I remember saying we're in a war of attrition. This war could last 1 year, 10 years, 100 years, but the war will keep being fought until the Israelis give up. And in order for a war of attrition to sustain, you need an influx of weapons coming in to support the war of attrition. And it's quite going to be difficult to see how the resistance will be able to withstand the lack of supply coming in from Iran. Maybe there's going to be different strategy coming up forward. Maybe they'll set up their own factories to set up their own weapons manufacturing. But again, this is the people of Syria, greater Syria, the Palestinians are resourceful and resilient. And as much as this is a tough blow, this is not the end for Palestine. And I just want to, so Dimitri, do we want to go? There's some very nice comments in the chat.
I did want to talk about Palestine in the final segment of this.
Go for it.
Just before I do that, I want to add to what you had to say. But before I do that, I want to. There, critical questions remain about what's going to happen on the ground in the near term, and that is, what will Russia's military bases, how will the Russia's possession of military bases on the Mediterranean coast play into this? Will Russia have to abandon them? Has it negotiated them away? Has it negotiated a deal which allows them to keep the military bases? Has Jolani said, we will not interfere with your military bases as long as you don't interfere with us? That remains an open question. The Turks, now that they have effectively, saved Israel's ass and surrounded Hezbollah by sending their proxy forces south to Damascus, it appears they are now going to turn their attention to the Syrian Democratic Forces, and there are indications they're about to attack them in the eastern part of Syria. And the Syrian Democratic Forces, Kurdish-led, have called for a general mobilization to prepare for a full-blown war with the Turkish forces. And here I think we're talking not about simply about the Turkish proxy forces. I think the Turkish military itself appears to be poised to enter the area that was yellow on the map we showed you, that has been controlled for years with the Americans by the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces. So these are very important near-term questions, and we really don't know how those are going to play out. So with that, I would like to add my comments on the plight of the Palestinians, who are the ones that, of course, I think it's fair to say, Rami, you and I are most concerned about, because they are undergoing a genocide as we speak. I've been saying for quite some time that I thought the best hope of the Palestinian people, because it appeared that Western governments had decided they were going to go all in on the genocide and had given Israel carte blanche to commit every and any atrocity imaginable against Palestinians, that probably the best hope for the Palestinian people at this stage was the axis of resistance. Well, I can't say that I believe that anymore. This has been a big blow to the axis of resistance. Hezbollah had to disconnect its military operations against Israel in northern occupied Palestine from its demand that the genocide in Gaza end. In other words, it agreed to lay down its weapons, even though the genocide was ongoing. Then it got effectively cut off from its arms supplies. It is now effectively under siege. The Syrian government, I don't think we're going to see any government in Syria anytime soon that is sympathetic in any way, shape, or form to the Palestinian cause. For some reason, Iran, even though it vowed a severe response to Israel's last missile attack on the country in mid-October, has not yet struck back, and I'm not sure that it will. The only member of the Axis of Resistance that has continued, and it's incredible. I'm talking, of course, about members of the Axis of Resistance outside of Palestine. Within Palestine, Palestinians are putting up heroic resistance every single day. Every single day. It's utterly remarkable what they've managed to do, how long they've managed to put up a fight in the face of this genocidal rampage in Gaza. But outside of Palestine, the one member of the Axis of Resistance that seems determined is Ansar Allah in Yemen, to their great credit. And whatever our governments, our depraved genocidal governments may say about Ansar Allah, they have been truly heroic in terms of trying to impose some kind of an economic penalty on Israel, and a military one through some limited drone and missile attacks on the genocidal state, that is meaningful. But how long they're going to remain in this fight, I don't know now. And so, and this is how I want to close out my comments to you today, friends. And that is, all of this means that the onus has increased on us as citizens of conscience to come to the defense of the Palestinian people. If in fact the axis of resistance has been weakened to a degree that it isn't going to be able to force an end to the genocide by military means, then we have to rise to the call. And many of us have. Many people have been out there. There were people today who came by my house, or not to my house, but they walked in front of my house where I live, as they have many times before, protesting the support for the Canadian government for the genocidal entity. They're, all around the Western world, there are protests happening virtually every day. Some people have been sent to prison for taking direct action against military contractors such as the drone maker Elbit Systems in the United Kingdom. There are people who are pushing for the boycott of corporations that are complicit in Israel's crimes against humanity. But we need to do more. We need to do much more. And I think that if we come together and are steadfast and united in our fight and in our support of the Palestinian people, we can cause our governments to bring an end to this genocidal rampage by the Zionist entity. And the last word I want to say, is none of this. Well, two closing thoughts. Don't let anybody tell you that this predicament that the axis of resistance now confronts is due to Israel's military prowess. That's a pile of rancid BS. Okay, Israel has not been able to defeat a lightly armed insurgent force in Gaza in over a year, despite the fact that it has rendered the entire Gaza concentration camp unlivable. It's still taking casualties. It lost a captain in its military 2 days ago in Gaza when there was an attack by resistance fighters on a tank. It hasn't been able to defeat Hezbollah, and in fact withdrew in disgrace again from South Lebanon. It is not Israel that overthrew the government of Assad, although it certainly helped to achieve his overthrow. It was basically Turkey. Turkey and the United States, which gave unlimited weapons to Israel, undoubtedly provided key intelligence to Israel, probably committed ground forces and even military aircraft to the cause of Israel. And Turkey, through its proxy army, who basically pulled Israel's ass out of the fire. So Israel's military, whatever happens, I think has been utterly disgraced, as has the society as a whole. And, at the end of the day, I wrote an article, two-part article in October and November of last year, in which was titled, America's Unsinkable Aircraft Carrier is Sinking. And that was a reference to a former U.S. Secretary of State, Alexander Haig, who had described Israel as America's unsinkable aircraft carrier. And the basic thesis or proposition of my article, it wasn't that Israel was going to be defeated by some particular resistance movement. It is that Israel's ability to impose its will on the Palestinian people and the broader region of West Asia is critically dependent upon the power of the United States. Israel, in and of itself, is a geopolitical pipsqueak that couldn't stand on its own 2 feet for 1 minute if it behaved this way without the support of the United States. It's the United States' power that enables Israel to do this. And if the United States loses its hegemonic position, then Israel will lose its dominant position, both within Palestine and in West Asia. And that, my friends, is exactly what is happening. Western hegemony is coming to an end. So whatever the axis of resistance is able to do or not, eventually Israel's power will disappear because America's ability to dominate the region will disappear. Sadly, however, it appears that there's going to be a lot of fighting that is going to have to be done at great cost to innocent human lives until we achieve that outcome. Rami, do you have anything to add before we go to the Q&A?
Well, first of all, folks, please start sending in your questions. Let them roll through. I'm going to be keeping them on the side, and while we keep receiving questions, I just want to say as well that the Arab world comes from has a legacy of being a place of culture, of dignity, and it was a great civilization. And similarly, the Chinese had their 100 years of humiliation that ended with the revolution. The century of humiliation ended with the revolution by Mao Zedong. I wouldn't discount the fact that certain Arab countries that have obviously failed the Palestinians, such as the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Saudis, and beyond, I wouldn't discount the fact that there could be some instability coming in there of people organically understanding that they are actively betraying the Palestinians. Things are going sour. Nothing is improving. And I wouldn't discount the fact that there could be some uprisings in these places. Palestinians, we all owe a huge debt to the Palestinian people, as Palestinians in the diaspora, as Arabs, or as just people of conscience around the world. Dimitri, you've mentioned, I just want to reiterate what you said before because it really hit me a lot. We owe to the Palestinian people, and we need to double our efforts in our protests, in our solidarity, and whatever actions that we can do to support the Palestinian people. So it's not the time to be in despair. It's maybe a new page in our pathway to liberate Palestine. And as long as the Palestinians in Gaza have as long as the Palestinians in Gaza are fighting, there's no reason for any of us to give up. There's 2 starred messages that I would like to read. First one is by Iranian Kiddo that says, "Thank you for what you do. Hope you'll visit Iran soon." That's definitely something that we hope to do at some point. And then this is quite the funny one, which is Insubordinate Academic, who says, "Time Magazine will name HTS Person of the Year." I mean, this wouldn't really surprise me.
As black humor. But,
yeah, in
the world in which we live, it's not impossible that will happen. So, sorry, go ahead, Rami.
If someone like Obama could end up with this,
or the guy in South Korea that they just tried to. Enact martial law. The Biden administration wanted him to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize about 6 months ago.
So it has its own curse, the Times statement, the Times Award. There's I Hate YouTube 999 who says, "Do you think Israel is going to annex the buffer zone in South Lebanon?"
Probably yes.
So
I think they'll annex anything they can get away with annexing.
I think that will they be able to succeed in doing so? I don't know. Are they going to do this in the next few days, weeks, or months? I wouldn't think so. But Israel does have ambitions of, creating bigger buffer zones, of capturing more Arab land. It's already doing so in Syria. It announced that the 1974 agreement between Syria and Israel has been canceled simply because Syrian Arab army outposts were vacated. Right, they dropped those positions because the army collapsed. And they took advantage of this technicality to capture more land in Syria, another 14 kilometers Golan Heights is Syria itself, but deeper into that region. So do they want to go to the Litani River? I would think so, absolutely. That was the whole goal of the South Lebanon state. the Free Lebanon State, sorry, that was based in Marja Ayoun, South Lebanon, during the Lebanese Civil War. It collapsed and failed. Hezbollah was able to kick them out. Will they try that again? Most likely. Lebanon is quite in a fragile situation. Dimitri, in one of our previous streams, you've mentioned that it's unfortunately a non-functional state. Can we expect some trigger to escalate things and push Israel into the Litani River? That's something that is definitely on their roadmap. Now the question is, will they succeed? Another question that we have is from Ahsan F. Happy for my Syrian friends, but can someone explain to me how this ousting of Bashar al-Assad will help Hezbollah Hamas, considering now their pipeline for equipment and arms is now gone?
I think it's very clear that this is a big blow to the Islamic resistance in Lebanon. So, however you feel about Bashar al-Assad and his removal from power, I don't know how anybody could deny with a straight face that this is bad for the Palestinian people. And I understand there are even some Palestinians, amazing to me, who are celebrating the ouster of Bashar al-Assad. I mean, how are they going to put up any kind of armed resistance to their obliteration? They've tried peaceful resistance, and we've seen what that has yielded. Absolutely nothing but brutality. So if you think that I certainly believe the Palestinian people have a right to armed resistance. I don't see that peaceful resistance. I used to believe that it was a way for them to gain their liberation. I don't believe that anymore based upon the behavior of Israel and its Western backers. So this is not good news for the Palestinian people. What would be wonderful news, as I said earlier, for both the Palestinian people and the Syrian people, is that a truly democratic government that is committed to the sovereignty and well-being of the Syrian people, but that is also determined to ensure respect for the human rights of Palestinians, come to power in Syria. That would be fantastic for both the Syrian people and the Palestinian people, but that's not what's happened. HTS is not a friend of the Palestinian people. They don't care about human rights. They are a terrorist organization. And the fact that they've allied themselves with countries that have destroyed Syria tells you all you need to know about the importance they attach to the well-being of the Syrian people.
Dimitri, there's a question from Schizo. I think this is going to be a one-word answer. Do you think the Gulf regimes will finally take action, or continue to only talk and do nothing? The Gulf regimes will do nothing at all.
I have a two-word answer, probably not. But I still think that the Gulf regimes are very nervous about how Israel's daily publicized horror show in Gaza is affecting the attitude of the populations in places like Saudi Arabia and Jordan. People are very angry. So I still think that they would much rather see this come to an end. I don't think they want the genocide to continue. The question is, are they actually going to take any concrete action to stop it? And I've seen no indication that they're prepared to do that.
There's a question from Gina Del Grotaglia, who says, don't the refugees, chiefly having been in Lebanon, know that it's not safe to return to Syria? I don't understand. Dimitri, do you want to quickly answer this, and then I'll have a follow-up answer?
I don't know. I mean, I'll be very curious to see whether they're prepared to return to Syria. Certainly, if I were a Syrian refugee, even if I thought that, that Bashar al-Assad was the incarnation of the devil, looking at who has replaced him, I would be very reluctant to go back there, especially if I had children. If I had a spouse, children, family members to take with me, I don't think I would be able to assure their security, or even that they will be fed. Syria is an economic basket case, and these people are these people going to revive the prosperity of Syria, help it to achieve its full economic potential? I doubt it. And is the fighting over? No, in fact, it may well intensify now that the Turks and the Kurds are about to have it out.
Dimitri, there was a post by Kevork on Twitter of like a couple of FSA Syrians in Sweden celebrating the downfall of Syria. And Kevork, I think, mentioned something along the lines of these diaspora Syrians want Al-Qaeda in power, but don't want to live under Al-Qaeda. So that definitely resonated with me. But additionally, I would say that there's something that we haven't really spoken about, which is the million of Palestinian refugees that ended up leaving Syria and are now in the diaspora in the EU. What's going to be the status of them if they ever want to return to Syria? Will HTS allow the Palestinian refugees to come back to Syria? I think that would greatly show what kind of position HTS will have on the question of Palestinians, refugees, and right of return, because we know that the Palestinians in the diaspora in Europe, it becomes much harder for them to return to Palestine when that opportunity will come. And that's Israel's goal, is to end support for the Palestinian refugees, scatter them around the world, and remove them as a united force in some way. So this is going to be quite something to look into. Now, let's see if there were any more questions. There's a few more that I have here, which is... sorry, I'm just trying to pick some questions that are a bit more diversified. There was a question related to how will Palestinians, or how will the resistance get weapons, considering the border crossing with Syria is now closed? I don't really have an answer to this, but we just need to also know that the resistance is extremely resourceful. I mean, in some way, it's impossible for weapons to enter Gaza. And at the beginning of the genocide in Gaza, I remember a statement from Abu Ubaidah saying, "Don't worry, the resistance can keep up with this kind of fighting for 1 year, and sustain and survive." It's been a year and more than a year now, and the resistance is still resisting. That means either they're manufacturing, they're getting it somehow. These are resourceful people that are.
So I just want to point out that the resistance in Gaza has published numerous photos showing that in their underground tunnel network, they have the capacity to manufacture weapons. Particularly, they've shown the manufacture of anti-tank missiles and shells, which they fire from shoulder-fired launchers. They call them, I think, the Yassins. So it's clear that in Gaza, where there has been this blockade, this strangulation, economic strangulation for well over a decade, they have the capacity to do that. I don't think there's any doubt that the Islamic resistance in Lebanon has the capacity to produce weapons internally, including probably, shorter range, non-guided rockets. But in terms of the longer range guided missiles with large warheads, the ones that could threaten Israeli military bases that are dozens of kilometers or more than 100 kilometers from the border with Lebanon, I suspect that, I'm no expert in weaponry, but my strong suspicion is that they would need to have a pipeline from a country like Iran in order to resupply for those particular types of weapons. The bottom line is, if the flow of weapons from outside of the country is completely cut off for an indefinite period of time, the Islamic resistance's combat capability will be significantly reduced, and it will probably become, rather than a regional a military force with regional power, it's going to be a purely localized military force that is entirely focused on defending South Lebanon from Israeli incursions.
There's this question here that says, Dimitri, have you heard anything from Laith Marouf? Is he okay? Now, I've spoken to him a few times in the past 24 hours. He's okay as one can be in this type of circumstance. But I also want to emphasize another fact, is that I believe his YouTube channel has been censored for 90 days, for 3 months, which definitely impacts his reach, definitely impacts his ability to educate us on what's going on in Palestine and in West Asia. So please, if you have the opportunity, subscribe to his Telegram channel, his Free Palestine TV, Twitter, and the list goes on. because we need to amplify his reach. And of course, if you have financial means, to donate to his donor box, which you can find on freepalestine.tv.
Yeah,
Anything
and
you want to say about this, Dimitri?
I too spoke to Laith this morning. You know, he's very concerned about the future of Lebanon for obvious reasons, and Syria. Laith is not just Palestinian; he's also Syrian, and he has family in Syria, so he's very concerned. But for the time being, he and his family are, as far as we know, they're safe.
Dimitri, do you think that we could wrap it up right now?
Sure. If we have no other questions, I think we'll call it a day, and thank everybody very much for joining us. In the week ahead, I'll just mention briefly, we're going to interview Matthew Ho, who has been on our program previously from the Eisenhower Media Network. Matthew is a former captain in the U.S. Marines, who now is an outspoken, very intelligent critic of U.S. foreign policy. And he'll be talking to us about his recent trip to Palestine and about, of course, everything that has unfolded in Syria in the last few days. And we may have other reports to do in the coming week, but I think we're going to be pretty focused on the events in Syria.
Sorry, just quickly to Tony Naber, who says, Rami, are you from West Bank or 48 territories? Just curious. I'm actually in the diaspora. I'm in Canada right now, which is where I met Dimitri Lascaris, but my family is from Jaffa, Palestine, which we can call it 1948 Palestine. So thank you everyone for tuning in to our live stream. Please make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and follow to Dimitri's Twitter account. And I think there's a Telegram. I forgot to put the description of this, to add these links on the description of this YouTube live stream. But please check any of the other videos on this channel. And we have all of our links there. And of course, if you have the means to subscribe to our Patreon for a monthly fee of $3 or $5 or $10 a month, or drop us a donation in this chat over here as well. So thank you all for tuning in. We have a busy week this week, and the fight carries on until the liberation of Palestine and beyond. See you, folks.
Everybody.